Now that we've finished setting up the high-res model into its individual layers, we're on to the retopology portion. Now what retopology is all about is basically you're building a new version of your model with a different topology, or the arrangement of polygons that make up the surface. There's a couple reasons why you do this, one being that if you have a sculpted model, it's likely you didn't take into consideration the polygon flow, you were just sculpting to make the form, and you're going to want a nicer polygon flow for proper animation deformation. And for games, it's usually done to reduce the model's complexity. So in both cases, you're generally greatly reducing the overall polygon count and then adding back in those details with either a normal map or a displacement map. So for us, we're just going to be reducing the overall model complexity and then baking that back in with a normal map. So you're going to want to open up the model that you've created in video 1 now. Or if you're just beginning to jump into this video, you can open up the one that I created here in the video 2 folder. So we'll open that up. Alright, now it's open, and just to make sure that I don't overwrite my existing file, I'm going to go here to Save As, and we're going to jump up to the video 3, and we're just going to call this Retopology 1. Can overwrite what's there. Alright, so the body armor is the file that's actually visible, so we might as well start on the retopology of this guy. So I think how we're going to go about it is, I know that this top area is a perfect circle, or at least a reasonably perfect circle. So I want to start with that cylinder, and then I will use the retopology tools to sort of spread the polygons down and outward over the top of the armor. So the first thing I'm going to do is hide all of these other extraneous layers that we don't need. And in order to set my circle up more easily, I'm going to align the work plane to this bit of geometry. So I'm just going to select these polygons right here that kind of represent hopefully the center point of how that was modeled. And I'm going to go to my work plane and align work plane to selection. So that looks like it's centered it fairly close to that guy. So I think, and we're going to hide some of these detail pieces because we don't really need all of these little screws and bolts and things. So I think if I double select that and then hold down the shift key and double click these guys, the armbands, maybe these pieces back here. Alright, now then you can press the shift H, and that'll hide everything that was unselected. Alright, so I think we're good now, so I'm going to create a new layer, and select the camera there, and then when I press in, it's going to create the new layer over whatever item was selected. So that way it'll keep it out of this folder where all the high-res assets are. Now the first thing I'm going to do is create that cylinder. So grab the cylinder tool, and I'm just going to hold down my control key, click and start dragging. Tilt that up a little bit. Obviously didn't capture my plane good enough. So the orientation of your primitives is always going to be based on the work plane. It's going to be oriented toward your work plane. But when you have a fixed work plane, it'll still kind of snap to what it traditionally would be. So if you have it too far on, so I just wasn't at that angle quite yet where it would snap to the upwards. You can also change the axis right here in the properties panel. So by holding down control, I can constrain that and see against that background object. I'm just going to make this all at 0. So I'm going to just want to see a tiny touch of that little black line there that represents the background object on that. So like I said, it's not exact, and we only want one segment in the top section. And I'm going to pull this piece down. Pull this piece till maybe right about there where it's hitting the armor. And I think that is good. So I'm going to press Q to drop the tool. And I forgot to check my number of segments around the outside. So I'm going to do a loop here, and we got 24 faces. And I think that's a little too many for my purposes. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to delete that, reactivate the tool, and I'm going to set this up to 18. And then now we're going to hit apply, and it's going to add that right in the exact same spot. And then Q to drop that. Okay, so now we have the cylinder the way that I want to do this. Now I'm going to hit Shift B. We're going to bevel this piece in. So activate by clicking in the viewport, and then we're going to be pulling in this top polygon. And then I'm going to hold down the Shift key and just click again in the viewport. That resets the tool for a new bevel, and I can bring this guy down just a little bit there, and then Q to drop the tool, delete to remove that polygon, and I'm going to rotate here to the bottom section, and I'm going to delete out that polygon. Alright, so now we have our semi-perfect circle that represents the collar section of the upper armor. So the next thing I want to do is we're going to reset our work plane, and so that we don't have to duplicate our work, I want to set on the symmetry options. But since we had set our work plane based on some geometry of the scene, it's not likely that it was perfectly at the origin. So what I'm going to do, just to make my life easier, is I'm going to double click these edges here, which represent the center. I'm just kind of rotating that in the viewport so I can align that up to make sure I'm getting the actual centers. Then going to my vertex, and I'm going to set the position of these, and I want to set these at 0, so just click OK. You can see both of them moved a tiny bit, so we were quite a bit off over what was actually in the center. And then I'm just going to select these two loops here, and then press L to make sure I got the entire loop selected. Delete, double click, delete. And now we're going to change the action center, and the action center just represents from where the tool originates from. And I like using the keyboard shortcut, so I'm going to press Alt and W on my keyboard, and that's going to set me to the origin. Now the keyboard shortcut for mirroring is Shift V. You can also find that in the duplicate tab. And then since we've set our action center, I just need to click literally anywhere. And we centered those edges, so those will automatically merge together when we mirror that over. So we can just drop the tool. So now we can enable our symmetry. And anything we do on one side of this will be mirrored over to the opposite axis. Alright, so we have a good base with which to start spreading our polygons over. So I'm going to jump into another workspace here. So I'm going to use my Control Tab layout switcher, and I'm going to go over to the Topology and hit Shift A to zoom in on this. And what this is going to do is this is going to give me a special view here in the topology viewport that'll make it easier for me to retopologize this. So it's always going to show me the foreground polygons. And then we can change the background, make it a little bit easier to see what's going on by pressing the O key. And we can select the inactive mesh option on this, and one of these should make it a little bit easier. I think for inactive, wireframe none. So we just want it to look like that. So that should give us a good enough view of our background. Alright, now the tool that is most important, I think, to the retopology workflow is going to be this Topology Pin. And really what this pin tool does is it packs a bunch of functionality into a single tool by just using keyboard shortcuts. So you click on the Topology Pin here, and as you can see, as you sort of hover over, it's going to highlight a specific thing. So when you're over a vertex, it's going to highlight the vertex. When you're over an edge, it's going to highlight that, and a polygon, and so on. And what this allows you to do is, you can see in the tool pipe what it's done here is it has the Topology Pin tool, and then it also has enabled this constrain to background. And what this does is this has a point constraint now, which anything you do to those points will force them to stick against the background, any visible background layers. So that's why we have this background layer visible here. So in order to get started with the Topology Pin tool, you always need to have some sort of geometry already created in the scene. So we've done that with the cylinder that we've created. If we hadn't created that, then you can start out with the pin tool by creating a polygon or something, and then we start flowing off of that. So the Topology Pin can't create geometry from nothing. So you have to have something to start with. So, and then the way we're going to start is we hold down the Shift key on this, and we're going to left mouse button click when we're highlighting this edge here. And what that does is that's going to draw off a polygon for us. And we're going to keep just doing that over the entire surface of our object, and we can release the Shift key and adjust the points and just move them around. And you can see as we sort of move this around that those are basically sitting on the surface that we've put back there. And we'll be tweaking that later on. So it's not 100% that it absolutely has to be right on the surface, but just hold down Shift again, and we can snap those pieces together. So you can see when you pull it out, it'll try and snap, but if for some reason you want this edge to be over there, you can grab that and drag weld it directly on top of another surface. So the process will be, for most of this, is to drag these out and snap these points together. And I'm trying to get some of these polygons here to kind of show up on a nice seam. We're going to be pulling out some of these a little bit bigger. And you can see, since the symmetry is on, it's automatically doing it on the other side. And I should also explain that I'm kind of working at half the resolution that I expect to here. This is really a low resolution version of the mesh. What I'm pulling out here is very low res, but I'm going to subdivide it later on. To get my final mesh that I'm going to be working on. It's just, for me, it's a lot easier to just be working with a smaller number of polygons. So and these ones here are going to be hugging around this shape. Snap that in there. So a lot of this is just sort of tweaking this stuff. So you'll spend a ton of time tweaking, and I'm not going to be showing you every single little polygon and every little motion that I do to move this around. But you can see if you're just clicking on an element, trying to kind of center that on there and just get a nice flow of the polygons over the surface. So the autosave is a good reminder to have that pop up to remember to save your file. So Control S should something happen. And like I said, that's good that we save that to a new file name. So I know that I want to kind of keep, my strategy is to keep the silhouette of the original model. So I mean, that's the most important factor when you're retopologizing stuff, especially for game assets, is you want that silhouette, that outer shape from any angle that you're going to be looking at to really sort of still retain the shape of the original form. So when you bake in the details, you're not going to be running into, issues of, things not lining up or things not matching, because that's sort of the dead giveaway. Is it'll look good facing straight on, but then when it rotates or something, if that silhouette is not there, then that's a dead giveaway that it's just a little too low resolution, at least for our purposes. So now another little trick with the Retopology tool is if you hold down the shift, and instead of left mouse button clicking and dragging out a polygon, if you right mouse button click, it'll bring out an entire loop here. And sometimes when you bring out a whole loop, it's not as good as snapping together, but we can just snap those points together. Bring this one down, snap these points together. So I think to get the initial form, I'm probably going to be ignoring this little hole in the chest cavity. And then I think we'll be revisiting that once we've subdivided and we have a few more polygons, because the way it is now, we don't have quite enough polygons to be able to do anything around this chest cavity. So I just keep pulling out polygons, keep snapping them together, is what a large part of this process is all about. So I think probably what I'm going to do now, since you have the basic gist of what the Retopology tool is all about, I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep working here, and I'm going to speed this up a little bit. So this will just be a little bit of me sped up working on this thing, and you can go through and see how I sort of go and add some polygons here and there. So I'm going to be getting thinner polygons across the middle of the breastplate area here. But you can see for the most part, it's very rough, but I'm trying to kind of create a similar size to the polygons, all of them, so they're almost kind of all quad. I know that's impossible to do, especially for this case. But just kind of keep things so that they're a reasonable shape so that they can grab that form in the background. So I'm going to keep working here. So if I have something interesting to say, I'll be sure to slow it down. Alright, so I think that looks like a pretty decent base topology there. Like I said, we're still going to do some work on this. So we can hit the Q tool to drop that, and we can hide our high res there just to kind of get a look at it, at our silhouette. So it's definitely good to look at your geometry without the background object there. And it definitely could be improved with more work. I think each time I do this, I come up with a completely different solution. But this one's not bad. So anyways, I think we're at the point now on this one where we got enough of it there that I think we're ready to subdivide this guy. So hit Control S to save. And then I'm going to hit Shift D, making sure I'm in polygons mode. And that is going to subdivide. So that's going to give us the number of polygons we want to start working with. And I think I'm going to fill this area in here with the edge fill or the bridge command. So I think if we knock these guys off, bridge, auto connection, we do that, that's automatically going to put in that for us. So I think there is double amount our polygons. And now for me, in order to kind of see this a little bit better, I'm going to jump into the modeling tab. And you can see in this particular scene, I guess the base material is green because it's just picking up the default base material on here. We can turn that background on. And I think really what we kind of want to see is we want to see just a little bit of this background mesh sticking through here. So I think what I'm going to do is I want to remove some of these loops here. Actually, I didn't subdivide that very well because it didn't smooth it all out. So Shift D, I'm going to go back. We're going to go to Catmull Clark. That was what the problem was. And then I'm going to delete out some of these edge loops, like these up here. We don't need those extra polygons on that, so that'll reduce our polygons a little bit. Let's do this part again. Edge bridge. And maybe I'm going to smooth that out a little bit to kind of blend that into the background there. So that is not terrible. I think I'm going to loop select the top here and then hit Shift up arrow. Maybe Shift up arrow to grow that selection one more. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to smooth this now over that background. And I don't want to do anything that's going to affect the roundness of this top section here. So go to select and invert, which is that left bracket. And then I'm going to turn on the background mesh, and we're going to go here to basic. So we're in our modeling tab. So from the modeling tab, we need to enable the mesh constraint. So I'm just going to click the mesh constraint on here and then click that little button to keep it up. And then we're going to go to the background, and we want to make sure that the geometry constraint is set to point. And that'll force all of those points onto the surface of the background. And I think just to force those into position, I'm going to turn the smooth tool on. I want to set this an iteration of 1. And I'm just going to click, and you can see that sort of, so it's trying to snap the geometry to that background. I think we need to deselect these guys in here as well. Smooth. All right, Alright, that's working pretty good for just about everything except for the arms. So there always seems there's going to be something you got to fix. So I'm going to go through and 1 millimeter on that. So now it's not going through it quite as much. And I think that's getting us a better silhouette. So I'm going to jump back in here. Control tab to my topology. Now I'm going to fix these weird issues. So you should be able to just snap those back into place by just grabbing the point and moving it a little bit. And there's always going to be a ton of manual tweaking on something like this. So we're just going to be grabbing a lot of points. And like I said, for any project, the retopology is really going to be the most tedious of it, but it's a lot more accurate and easier than having to model the thing from scratch and measuring it all out, or doing it from background images. So at least you know you're going to be able to get the form identical. So that is the one shining detail about retopology that really makes it worthwhile. And I think I might go through and sort of manually delete some of these loops. Myself. Just because I think some of these polygons are probably fairly unnecessary. So always spinning around, always looking at that silhouette. So drop that and grab my edge tool. I'm going to select these two loops and remove those. Maybe I can do something about this section in here now. Get my topology pin. See if we can't. Make some sense of this shape here on the front. Alright, that seems to be a pretty reasonable facsimile of what that shape looks like. We also lost something here on the front. So I think I had 1 millimeter here when I did the smoothing offset. So I always try and get sort of a nice flow between objects because it'll pay off when you're baking later on. Some of the jagged edges might cause some errors, so the sort of the smoother and nicer you can make all of this look, sort of the better results you're going to end up getting. And the better it's going to sell that silhouette and those details. You can see that sort of curves around, so I kind of want to make these polygon flows match to a degree the topology of that underlying mesh. So I think sort of you're using straight lines here, but you kind of want to imagine what that would be if it was a curve and you needed to make that flow a little bit more. So it's the same sort of thing when I'm doing subdivision surfaces. I think that having a really beautiful base mesh underneath your subdivision surface is really going to make your subdivision surface model look even better. So sometimes you'll turn off subdivision surfaces and you'll see that your model just really looks terrible. And you're like, oh, that's a mess. Well, luckily my subdivision surfaces are, cleaning up a lot of that. So I'll always be extolling the virtues of good topology and nice clean meshes, as well as having a clean scene. When I kind of get these details so they align with details of the underlying mesh. Like I said, this is just a lot of manual, tedious work. That's why I made the comment in the intro that sometimes it can feel like you're just modeling it all over again, just with the amount of work that goes into it. But, obviously you're really not. There's lots of things we don't have to really take into consideration for doing this. Just do a lot of rotating around your model, trying to get a idea of whether or not you're capturing that silhouette good. So you can kind of see in the topology mode right here around these edges, this is where I'm looking. Is you want to see, do these polygons look like they're capturing this very edge? So it's sort of those glancing edges of your object is really where you're trying to give it the most attention as to whether or not that's capturing your silhouette or not. And then you're going to jump back here to the modeling tab. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'm just going to use the push tool. I can kind of, making sure that I have the constraint disabled. Go back to the push tool. So you can see as you push that, you can start to see the background mesh kind of peek through. And that's how you have a good idea of whether or not you're getting close. Alright, that should be good enough for this video. So I think you've seen enough to understand what the process is where you're using the topology tool to extend out the polygons. And to speed my workflow up, I like to work the half resolution and then subdivide that, and then I use the smooth tool on that, but you need to be careful that you have all of your polygons sort of above the background surface before using the smooth tool. As you see, the problem that I ran into is since I have a double-sided surface in the background, some of them kind of got sucked down to the opposite side, and it took a lot of tweaking. So if you're careful to make sure that all of your polygons are above the surface in your background before you apply that smooth tool when you've subdivided it, you're going to end up with better results than what I had. So in the next video, we're going to model in the rest of the details and the rest of the form so we can get a more accurate silhouette on this guy, and I'll be tweaking him a little bit more. And then we'll be wrapping up the armor and moving on to the next topology pieces. So thanks for watching. Hey there, welcome back. So this video is really just a continuation of the retopology of the body armor piece from the last video. So if you're following along, you're going to just want to open the asset that you saved at the end of the last video, and we're just going to continue working on that. So we're going to start off by tweaking this a little bit more and then finishing off the modeling aspects of this model. So let's get started. So I'm going to start here fixing the collar. If you found that this collar section has become less than round, kind of what's happened here, is a great function that we can do where we can just grab this edge right here, and then we're going to go to deform radial. We just click there and that'll force that into a perfect circle again. Do that on the outside edge, radial. I'm just going to move that guy up. So now I'm just going to start doing some traditional modeling stuff here, like where we're going to take this guy, we're going to take this hole, and then we're going to press Z. We're going to move this back. I'm going to hit R, and we're still in, let's see, the local action center. So what I want to do is scale that. And that'll give us some polygons there to work with. So basically what we're going to do is giving this some thickness. And I think for this, we're going to be grabbing these edges here. Not these ones in the background, obviously. And we're hitting Z. Drag that down, and then R to scale all that as well. W there. And then Z one more time for another polygon loop. And I think if we hit a apostrophe, that will trade us with the foreground and the background. And then we can hit the U key to unhide, bring those elements back, so that way we have something to snap against. And then hit the apostrophe key again. I'm going to merge these guys. So Vertex Join. Yep. And the way the join works is you select the first polygon, and then the second one, or the last one that you select, is where it gets moved to. So you join. You see it moves those pieces together, makes them a single piece of geometry. And since we have symmetry on, and it obviously isn't working over here, somewhere along the line, our smooth or one of the other functions ended up messing up our symmetry, as is wont to happen. I don't like the fact that that just said 6 vertices joined, so I undid that. I only want to have 2 vertices. For some reason it's saying there's 6 there, so that's probably some issue that's going to require mesh cleanup. So let's go ahead and select that and run our mesh edit, mesh cleanup. And that has added in some extra vertices. I don't know exactly where those came from, but it does happen. Alright, so we're going to take this section here, and I'm just going to scale that out. Move it a little bit. I'll be tweaking this more later, so it doesn't have to be perfect. Then we're going to take this guy and bevel him back. So Shift B, bevel it back. So that's going to create that little shape indentation there at the bottom. Now to the arms, I'm going to select this entire loop. And I could definitely do with more tweaking, but I think what we're going to do to start here is I'm going to hit Z, click in the viewport, and what I want to do is I want to do a local offset. So I think we're going to shift that inward on that guy. And then I'm going to hit the Shift key and click again, and that's going to create a new. And then we're going to come inward on that. And you can see what that's really going to do is create a mess. So maybe once I've created that, I'm just going to hit W and Alt A to move my action center to automatic and just move that inside and then scale that just on one axis. So I think that's going to get us better than doing that offset, because some of these polygons you can see have gotten a little bit twisted, so that's going to require more tweaking. And I think we're going to grab another loop down here, Z on the inside, and drag that down. Turn off our symmetry. We can actually scale that then from the center just a little bit. So we're not going to be modeling the inside, and that's the great thing about doing game assets, is you really don't want to end up modeling anything that's not going to get seen. So now some of these other details that we want to bring out. So I'm going to go back to my retopology layer here, which will get my topology pin. And I'm going to start pulling some of these vertices around some of these details, because what I want to do is I want to bevel these guys out to sort of mimic that. So that's going to grab that in the silhouette. Alright, so I think that gets that shape right there. We're going to want to do the same thing under here. Trying to get that to snap to the surface. So you got to make sure you keep rolling this over. Make sure you're snapping it to the location you want to. You don't want it up too high. I actually want it on the surface of that underlying armor section. So when we bevel that, it'll be popping out of the armor. I think maybe this bottom section, we don't even need this, but we can drop the tool, loop select, hit backspace. Oh, and that's much better. All right, so we've done that to one side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what we did before, since we basically lost mirror a long time ago. I'm going to re-mirror this guy. So set all of these guys, these edges. Vertex, set position, that to 0. And since I've done my editing on the left side, this time we're going to remove the opposing side. Make sure we get all of these polygons now. Press L for loop. L for loop. Delete. Alright, something's still connected here. Yeah, this one right here. Alright. Now we can hit Alt W to set that to origin, Shift V, click, and we have our mirror back. Turn on symmetry, set our action center to none. I think we're back to being golden. So I'm going to turn off that background layer here. Oh, you can see how bumpy that shoulder is. Hit the apostrophe to go back. So let's hide this stuff again up here. So H to hide selected. And hide this stuff under here. And H to hide. Apostrophe. I'm gonna grab this topology pin, just tweak these points around. It'll snap them back to the surface, the actual surface that we want them on. So I keep checking that silhouette. Alright, now it's looking like something. Not looking like that bumpy mess we had. Same thing here. Alright, we just want to bevel this out a little bit. So Shift B, we're going to bring that out and bring that in. So that's going to give that little guy there, and do the same thing up here. Shift B, and we can just use apply to give that the exact same setting as the other one. And the only thing left really that we need to do here is to sort of, I guess, fix this bottom edge. I'm going to middle mouse button click there, see if I can't figure out. Double click on the edge itself. Oh, it's another problem. Got this in here that we don't really want. So now we should be able to just double click on that and select the whole darn thing. So if we do a smooth on that, not really getting me the result I want. So we scale that guy, and I'm hitting Alt X to jump me into my local. Kind of at least scale that down to make it nice and flat. So what's going to happen now if we deform and push that out? Now I think what we want to do is the Z, create that edge, and then we're going to scale that inward. And that's going to give us our bottom section there that I wanted. Now this one, I think we could probably put the smooth on it a little bit. It'll solve some of these issues, like that little thing right there in front. That is exactly what it did. And I'm also forgetting this back part section. So if we count these edges here, 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's 8 edges there. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 edges there. We should be able to edge, bridge, auto connect. If we select this guy and then this guy, Shift G to select between. We should be able to Shift B, bevel that sucker outward. And then I'm going to actually, I think, delete that. create a new layer. Enable this guy. Now I'm going to create, from the basic here, we're going to go to the capsule. Rotate my work plane, so I'm creating a capsule, not with symmetry. And we need to change our radius, our end size. So definitely want that on the 0. So the end size there. Oh, this is 66. So if we copy that into the inside, that'll make that a sphere. So really this is just about sort of eyeballing it, but I want this to be very similar shape. And I think segments, we could probably bring this down 6. And then we had 8 of these across, so 1, 2, 3, 4 on that. That just might be about perfect on the end caps. But the sides I think can come down. Alright, that looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to drop that. Select the bottom portion of that. And we just want to select this loop here and this loop here. I'm going to control X, and I'm going to go back to this mesh, turn that guy off, control V, jump over to the modeling view, and see about connecting these guys up. Nope. 2, 3, 4. We got 1, 2, 3, 4. Edge bridge. Oh, this guy is subdivision surface, so let's disable that. Bridge. So how are we doing on these other 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? I think it's going to work out. I'm just going to take that, bridge those across. And then we're going to need to close up the bottom of this guy. Select those 2 edges, and we need to have 1, 2, 3, 4 segments on that, maybe 6. Alright, so bridge there, and we want to up the number of segments so we can connect those. creates a single one there. So now I'm selecting this guy. It's the Shift G to select between two objects. And then now I want to kind of hit the Alt Z, which is your element. I'm going to select some of these elements just to make sure that I keep this a nice cylinder. I'm going to move these down a little bit. I think I'm going to have to Shift B, bevel this guy in some. That's revealing some sort of an error in here. So I can Vertex Join those two. This one I'm going to join averaged. And those two join averaged. So we have one polygon here, one polygon there. So I think I'm gonna go work on this side. This is where I have this connected over here. So I'm gonna end up mirroring this again. So we're gonna add a polygon there. And I have our one triangle. Polygon there, that guy. And I think we can select that. Delete there. So really, retopology is kind of half science, half art, and a little bit of luck sometimes. So now that I have that half done, I'm going to center these edges again. So vertex, set position, 0, and then we're going to loop select. Let's select all of this. Loop select, and we definitely do not want all of this. Alright, so delete. Still selected down here. Delete are still connected. Where else are you still connected? Right there is where it is. All right. Make sure that whole outer edge is selected and centered. And then Alt W, Shift V, and click. All right, so now we have all the geometry we need in this model. So I'm going to pause here and I'm going to continue tweaking on this guy a little bit more. We're very close to having him completely finished, and I'll be back in a second and we'll wrap up the rest of this model. So after about another 10 to 15 minutes worth of tweaking here, I think I've got this all smoothed out. We got a really nice topology. I've cleaned up all the niggly little issues here. So the way to really compare this is we're in our modeling tab and we can turn on our background mesh, and you can kind of see the way those two are peeking through each other, that the lower one is just really kind of peeking through at these vertex points and the rest of it. So that right there, in my opinion, is just about a perfect retopology mesh that we've created. So we just got a couple more house cleaning things to wrap this up. So I'm going to delete that unnecessary layer here. I'm going to name this low res body armor. And we'll even spell it right. Low res body armor. So I think the last details we need to work on are these little cylinder guys here in the back and this little chest guy. And I'm going to borrow some of the geometry from that foreground element there to make those in there. So I'm going to create new so I can disable that temporarily. Hit our apostrophe key to go in here, and I'm going to select this loop here. I think. Now let's grab a polygon loop. Press L, Control C. Copy that into the new mesh. And let's do the exact same thing back here on these cylinders. Our apostrophe key, so we're in the right layer again. Loop, Control copy. Go back to this, Control V. So I'm going to select an edge, hit Z, and Alt X will put me in my local axis there. W to move, and we'll move that out. So let's turn off subdivision surfaces on that. I'm going to hit Shift D, and I'm going to Catmull Clark pull that down a little bit. R to scale. I want to look at where this edge is. I think we can select this loop of polygons and bevel in. All right, so I think that does a pretty good job of mimicking that. And we also have this guy. So we'll turn off the subdivision surfaces on that. Get rid of these extra edges. backspace. Now I'm just gonna extend these out, Z and click, and then W to move. And then I think in this front, we can just bridge these two pieces together. Actually, nope. I'm going to select around the whole outside edge of there. Polygon and make. And then select that polygon and spike. So that way we can push that out a little bit. Get rid of that unnecessary edge. So let us move that out. And let's do a quick edge bevel on that. All right. We're going to actually, let's just spike that as well. Remove that edge. Remove that edge. Scale this one up ever so slightly. Bevel him in. All right, so I think we can cut out of that layer, paste in there. And then that's the next thing we need to do, is we need to assign a material to this. So I'm going to press M on this layer since everything is selected. All polygons are selected when nothing's selected. We're going to call this Bake Armor. I'll just accept the defaults on that one. And kind of for the baking, what I like to do is we're going to go through and we're going to set our blending angle here on this, or our smoothing angle, excuse me. And I like to set that to a really high number, 178 degrees. And that will smooth everything over. We're going to hide out those. So that'll all be overwritten later on by the normal map. And then when the time comes after we're done baking, we're going to take this piece and we'll mirror it to the other side. Looks like I can hide this. And I got that extra bevel in there. We want to delete that out. Always delete unnecessary hidden polygons. All right, delete that. All right, so now we have completed the body armor on that one. So I think in real time it took me probably about 2 hours of actually doing that. And while that was quite a long time for one piece of armor, it's considerably less than having to model that again from scratch. And once we get it baked down with the texture maps, it's going to be very accurate and have all of the same visual detail as the original model. So in the next video, I'm going to be taking you through some other retopology techniques that we're going to be using on the rest of the body. I'll be showing you on the flight suit next. So thanks for watching.